I'm Tony Ruiz, contributing editor at Gold Derby, here with Tony Fanning and Todd Fjelsted, who are the brains behind the visuals, the production design of Showtime's The First Lady. And I think one of the things, and either one of you can start with this, is one of the things that I always find interesting is when you have two designers working together, particularly on something this massive of a scale, when you're tackling all these different time periods. How do you two work together? What is your collaboration like?
Should I answer that one, Tony? That wasn't really the intention, that there was going to be two designers initially. Basically, what happened is we have 11 decades of history and 3 different actresses playing the 3 roles. So the first block was Betty Ford, and all of Betty Ford's scenes were shot at the same time, the young version, the older version, etc. And so that was when I came in, was to do that portion and to create the White House sets and get it rolling. And then at a certain point, we realized it was kind of impossible to do all 3 blocks back to back with the same team. There was just too many sets, too many locations, too much to figure out. And Tony's team came in and did the second 2 blocks, and they kind of started their process while we were finishing the Betty block. So we had overlap, but we didn't really get to collaborate very much because we were doing such completely different worlds and different characters.
So then, Todd, I'll kind of start with you. So since your block was the first block that was shot, what was your kind of in to this world? Where did you start?
With the scripts, of course, always with the scripts. And then we had a researcher come in who was brilliant. She was amazing, and she started finding every single image we could possibly find online and Library of Congress, various books, etc., for the Betty Ford block and for the White House itself. Our supervising art director on that one, Gina Cranham, she started the process of building the White House, which was, gigantic process. And while she did that, I started working with the researcher and our assistant art directors on locating all of the different elements for the Betty Ford and Jerry Ford, their family photos, their home in Virginia, their home in Palm Springs. There's so many different sets that had to occur in conjunction with building the White House. So in a lot of ways, the art director, Gina, in the first block kind of took on the White House and made that her baby. Of course, there's multiple people involved and a lot of quality control to occur. And then when Tony's team came in, of course, they're going to redo everything, because it's all different time periods and all different politicians and employees of the White House, et cetera. But basically, it was just a ton of research occurring while the White House is being built into the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, which was kind of Betty's portion.
And Tony, I've read that you call yourself kind of like a White House history buff to a certain extent, and you've worked certainly in that environment, whether it's on the West Wing, and I know you did stuff with 13 Days and with Lincoln. So was there something particularly interesting about tackling 2 completely different time periods for the same project?
For me, it was mostly about, I'm intrigued by all of the history behind it all. So, anytime I can get my hands on that kind of information, I feel I'm a White House history buff because of the work that I've had to do. And I've just it's not like I sought it out. I just kind of fell into doing it a number of times. And so, I kind of know the ins and outs of the White House pretty well at this point. For me, it was, really trying to understand, because there were so many sets in this and so many time periods. I got asked, and then, once along the way, like how many sets we actually did. And I actually figured out it was over 350 sets we've done for the whole series. So, and that's like every, considering every environment a set. So the challenge of that, and also changing things over in the scheduling of it, was, is figuring out the puzzle of the whole thing is really what interests me. And, enveloping myself in the characters and the time periods, and how those time periods inform the characters and vice versa.
Yeah, and one of the things that I wondered as I was watching this is, especially knowing now that you tackle both the Roosevelt section and the Obama section, does one present, is one more challenging than the other from a design perspective?
I would say the more challenging was Eleanor, and that's mostly because of the changes that took place during that administration in the White House. So some of the sets that were set up, like the main foyer of the residence and the East Wing, those didn't look the same, or they weren't laid out the same. The East Wing didn't exist. So, where does the First Lady have her offices? But I found it intriguing how much influence actually FDR had on the layout of the White House and how it functioned. A lot of what we think of as how the Oval Office happens and all of that, how we see the president enter the Oval Office, all of that was set up for FDR, and to help him with his handicap and to keep his privacy. And so all of that is kind of, it's different, but those ins and outs, it's like, how do you retell the story that we are seeing in the other blocks, where the First Lady is using, the East Wing office, and yet Eleanor didn't have an office. They didn't think it was important for her to have an office. So she basically worked out of her bedroom, or what's called her sitting room, and her dressing room became her private bedroom. So all of those kind of small details I think it's so interesting to put that together in these overall stories, and see how the White House itself is a character in the series, and how it changes and how it's had to function for them.
I think one of the other interesting things about it is the fact that as the White House changes, but there's also choices, I think, that back up who these women were, that there's character related choices. Is that something that you guys constantly, think about as you're designing, like how the design services the story and the character?
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. I know that for Betty, she had an affinity for yellow, which her daughter Susan was constantly kind of deriding her for. She painted a lot of the rooms in the White House yellow and brought in a lot of yellow fabrics. There's even an image of one of the rooms that we actually decided not to recreate because it was a little bit too insane for camera. But that Susan in the story kind of makes a joke about it. I'm sure that was written in because of how much she teased her mom about it. But for sure, I mean, these stories are so incredible. These people they literally changed history on a daily basis, each of them. And so of course their stories are what drove, I'm sure, everyone involved in the project to really embrace it and get excited about it and bring their A game.
I love that the person behind Glow is saying that something was too insane for camera.
Yeah. It's a little different when you're in the 80s in wrestling. A little different from determining the futures of the country.
Although wrestling and politics, maybe not that much difference, actually.
Not that different, actually. Yeah, that's true.
I'm curious as to what you're working. Susanna Bier is one of those directors that has this, I think, ability to tackle these big canvases. And whether it's The Night Manager or something like this, what was your guys' working relationship with her?
Mine was a little odd because we started right as it's this pre-vaccine. So COVID was at a very, very bad stage, and we were location scouting in Georgia. The entire series was shot in Atlanta, and the certain anxiety over that for everybody and fear of that drove a lot of the decision making. So for Suzanne, she couldn't really be on those scouts. She had to be very protective of herself because she's gonna be interacting with the performers and in a very tight insular world all day. So she had to be very protected. So the relationship was through photos and Zoom meetings, much like this, for several months until we got to the actual shoot. And then I was always ahead several days, several weeks even, on the upcoming sets. So we didn't get to interact in the same way as she would with, say, the actors or the DP who are present there on set. But it was all, again, through photos and Zoom and occasional in person, but typically that was the scenario for me. I think Tony's team had the benefit of having the vaccinations occur as they were kind of coming in. So I think they may have had a better experience in that world than we did.
Was that your experience?
Yeah,
ahead,
that
Tony.
was my experience. As I came in right as the vaccines were happening, and I started meeting with her in person right away. And she can be a tough nut to kind of wrap your head around, because she does want you to bring your A game to the table. So she wants to stay out of your way a bit, but you also, she wants to see what you have to bring to the table. And so you're constantly trying to pull a bit of information out of her. But as she gets closer and closer to the actual shooting of the scene, you get more and more information. But usually you've covered the broad strokes so she can work within that beforehand. But she really is one of those people who relies on us to know what the environment is, to understand the history behind it and the reasons for doing everything. And to have some sense of, she loves to have a sense of style and beauty in what we do. So that's all great for a designer to bring to the table, but a lot of her work really occurs with the cast on set, and some of the decisions that happen are right there in the moment. So you're there, you're able to participate in that ending aspect, very briefly before you go off to do, what's ready for the next morning. So
I'm curious. One of the things that I've always found fascinating is the title production designer, and it's a title that's evolved over time. It used to be art direction, and now it's called production design. For people that maybe aren't familiar with the terminology, do you see a difference between the two, between the term art direction and the term production design?
Oh, yes. The production designer's role is a bit more esoteric in some ways. The art director is an extremely technical and complicated and complex role. And they're, in a lot of ways, they're kind of like the AD of the art department to the production designer's director. That changes project to project, person to person. But traditionally, the art director was the production designer for many, many decades. I think the terminology was invented as we started to get into more departments. For example, now we have a visual effects department. We have departments we didn't have at all when the film roles were first created. So I think now the production designer is kind of in a way responsible for maintaining a certain quality control over all of the departments that are visual. Even to some degree, we'll interact with costumes, definitely props and graphics and painting, building, just like there's so many departments that the production designer has to kind of keep an eye on and be aware of. And that's true for the art director too, but I think the production designer is the one who most interfaces with the director, the DP, the producers, the locations manager, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas the art director kind of tends to stay in the office and manage the crew and the schedule, the budget, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I always think of them as being more the project manager. They handle all of the construction, paint, sculpting, greens, and then the decorator is your other project manager, and both are collaborators. But I think of it as like two teams of people that are kind of co-heads for you.
How has technology kind of influenced and impacted this particular field? Because it's something that I just find so fascinating is to know how, the evolution of the craft of filmmaking and television.
I think visual effects probably plays a lot into that. Nowadays, so much is accomplished quickly, rather than, for example, we had a sequence where Betty and Jerry are seeing the Nixons off after his resignation. And, we needed a helicopter and a whole bunch of stuff just for the scene to exactly match footage. Now, that's not really that feasible on a really tight television schedule. So, of course, you get into green screen and creating those elements in visual effects. That's just a small example. Obviously, you get into a Marvel film or, something of the like, a sci-fi series, you're dealing a lot more with visual effects and other departments that didn't pre-exist.
And technology is changing how we work in the art departments as well. I mean, we have, a lot of our staff, because of COVID and because of where we were working, the amount of people that we could get to work on the productions, a lot of people work remotely. So there's that aspect of it. And computer programs are changing all the time. These design programs are getting better and better all the time. So that technology is, I find, especially with a lot of the younger people in the art department, keeps changing and keeps getting better and keeps evolving and keeps getting faster. And I find it, I don't know about Todd, but I find it hard to keep up with it all. And so I'm always grateful that other people, are interested in it and want to use it and want to, learn more tools. But it can get confusing, but it's also made, I've been around long enough to have seen, storyboards turn into animatics, turn into 3D modeling. I was a part of doing the Polar Express, and in the time that we worked on the Polar Express, the whole kind of pipeline and way we designed sets and got them to the visual effects and animations department totally changed over the year that we did it, because the technology just kept getting better. And that's exciting, but it's also challenging and frightening at times.
I think we have a running joke in our department that when you're unsure on what to handle technologically, make sure to call a millennial.
It's like me, when I don't understand something, I ask one of my students to do it for me. It's like, can you figure this out for me?
Yes.
Just really quickly before we wrap up, I wanted to know if there was a single set or a single moment for each of you that you just look at and go, yeah, I nailed that. That you're just like, yes, I got that one. Do you have favorites?
My favorite? I'm a huge fan of the treaty rooms that we did. Unfortunately, Todd, we didn't do the treaty room for the Betty block, but I got to do it for both Eleanor and Obama. And there's just such a great sense of history there. And I think, what Michael Smith did for the Obamas was totally elegant and beautiful. And what we were able to cobble together and understand from Eleanor's period, they're just some of my favorite sets, how they turned out, but also just the history that existed in those spaces.
I love those sets, by the way. Absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
I think our favorite, or my favorite from our team, was probably Grand Rapids, Michigan in the 40s. It was just such an unexpected set in this scenario. I wasn't really expecting to create a period small town. And that really was exciting. That was really fun because there was a lot of photos of what it looked like. And we kind of had to find a location that was similar and then drastically alter it. And that was so challenging, but really fun. And to show up that day and see, period cars everywhere and the costumes, and it's just amazing. It was really like being there.
Well, gentlemen, congratulations. A team effort that maybe wasn't initially supposed to be, but it still works as a coherent whole. So thank you both so much. Everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the Emmys, and stay tuned for interviews with more contenders throughout the season. Todd Fjelsted and Tony Fanning from the First Lady, thank you both so much.
Thank you.